What we're trying to do is allow natural processes to come back in, to see the restoration and creation of habitats, and in the long term, increase the biodiversity that we have on site. It's an experiment. We have no set way of doing things, but we're looking at trialing different types of intervention, different types of prescription that we hope to learn from and share that learning with others in how they also approach landscape management. Now, the project that we've come up with this year is a new way of looking at landscape. Instead of it being fields and parts of forestry and so on, compartmentalized areas, we're looking at more holistically as a set of habitats, woodland, grassland, wetland, that interact with one another. And what we're hoping to see in due course is a landscape that's self-sustaining and self-adapting to Scotland's changing climate, because we know things are changing and will change, and we want to let natural processes guide us and study those natural processes. It's a really positive vision because, of course, at Threave, we're inspired by our osprey breeding program that we've had for over 10 years, almost 15 years. It's demonstrated in practice the power of nature to bounce back, that nature has an amazing ability to regenerate. So it's a really positive story that we want to be telling with this project. Now, I think most people will be local. It's a town hall meeting, but just so we're all aware, we're looking at Threave Estate, which is a 1,600-acre estate to the west of Castle Douglas in Dumfries and Galloway. We're focused on one of our constituent farms, a former dairy farm called Kelton Mains. And it's a site surrounded by really important designated areas, Triple SI, SPA, Ramsar. We'll touch on these a little bit more. But that area that we're interested in is the keystone, if you like. It's like an anchor point into the landscape that will hopefully support and spread the ecological value of all these designated areas. Now, the project's important for a number of reasons. I've mentioned already that positive message about how we can restore biodiversity. We know it's often quite a depressing battle that we're up against when we're dealing with habitat loss, environmental crisis upon us. We want to try and show steps that we can take to make things better. And as I've said before, we're looking to learn from our mistakes, let nature take a lead. And we've got this idea of a 100-year plan, because we think that's how long it will take to see different kind of mechanisms in nature come back fully. And it also gives us ample time to correct any mistakes that we make along the way. It's also quite exciting for us being the first of its type in Northern Scotland, perhaps a UK first as well, in what we're doing with a former dairy farm. And we're hoping that we can provide case studies for other landowners and farmers on new methods of land management and also things that can benefit the future of agriculture. And of course, with the National Trust for Scotland, it's so important that our core mission is at the forefront of what we do. It's quite complicated, some of the stuff that we're discussing. And we want to make sure that this is an unusually accessible and understandable project that really puts people at the center of what we're doing, and in particular, our local community in Dumfries and Galloway. So how do we make this happen? Well, it would be quite difficult if we didn't try and break it down. So what we've done and what we want to try and demonstrate today on site is a way of conceptualizing the project, not as a single activity, but as a number of work streams. And each of these work streams or projects, mini projects, have quite a fun theme, but have a really important outcome. So we're looking at wilding our woods. We want to show how our native broadleafs can come back, looking at regeneration, looking at planting, looking at comparisons between the two and deer management. We're interested in grazing, and we've got a technology partner with smart cows, something we'll talk a little bit more about. So really important to get those wildflower meadows, which we speak a lot more about as being so important for carbon capture. And of course, we want to tell our stories as well. We've got a really rich site. You might have seen the story earlier this year about the another Galloway Glens initiative, the Can You Dig It, and the wonderful discovery of that 10,000-year-old burnt hazelnut. We want to keep that human aspect to the site. We've got interesting projects we're hoping to work with others on slowing down a mill burn to the west of the site. One of the flagship activities is creating a new wetland, or allowing a wetland to become a lot more dynamic, putting in visitor infrastructure such as butts and boardwalks to allow our visitors to see more of the site than ever before, but also to preserve those core paths that we know are so popular with our community, and also to commission new research on understanding native populations, such as native geese in the Kendi Basin. So we had a route lined up. We've had to change a couple of wee things with the weather and with who we have, but I'm hoping we can move live to Littlewood Hill. David, are you able to share your... Great. Chris, I'd like to introduce Chris Stones, who works with Connix. He is one of our ecological partners, and he's on site to be our kind of reporter. David Thompson, who is our cameraman. He's the estate manager. Chris, could you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at on the top of Littlewood Hill, please?
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so yeah, we're stood on Littlewood Hill, and the reason why we've come up here is it gives us a very good vantage point for a large part of Kelton Mains of the Threave Landscape Restoration Project area. Currently, David has got the camera pointing towards Littlewood Hill, Ancient Woodland, or Meiklewood Hill, as it's also known. And as I say, that part of Threave, the Kelton Mains, is an ancient woodland. He's now panning round into what is part of the wetland area. It's currently designated as a triple SI. And on the western side of that is the Carling Walk Lane, which is a very kind of man-made water body. It's been canalised and straightened and dredged over the years, so it doesn't have the kind of natural processes and natural forms of a water body. He's now heading over towards River Dee and towards the wetland area, and you can see Threave Island as well, just over there in the distance. So whilst most of the site itself is not actually designated, the River Dee and its associated wetlands are SPA and Ramsar. And I think Littlewood Hill, where we're currently standing, is also known for its ancient habitation and enclosure. I think it's going to be protected through scheduled monument at some point in the future. And the aim really today for myself and for David is to, as Sam alluded to, is to try and get around the site, point out the existing features of the site, and also point out the areas that are going to be improved under the Threave Landscape Restoration Project, and what we're going to do as part of that project to improve the site for biodiversity, to reconnect it to nature, and restore the natural processes.
Great. Chris, could I, if maybe get you to head down towards the bund, and I'm just going to bring in Hugh and take control of the screen. And Hugh and I are going to talk a little bit about really some of the science and research that we've been putting in to make sure that what we're doing here are the right things, and that we're getting the right benefit and not creating any more problems. We want positives from what we're up to. Hugh, are you online?
Certainly am, Sam. Yep, yeah. Yeah, well, look, sorry, thanks for bringing me in at this point. Do you want to start off with a little bit about some of the hydrological stuff we covered? Yeah,
it'd be good. I mean, what we're going to show in a little while, I mean, the key kind of one of the headline parts of the site being Ramsar triple SI, clearly the wetlands. And the wetlands is something that we really want to get right and see the benefits of that. Hugh, could you tell us a little bit about the studies that we've done to inform the decisions that we're making on the wetlands, please?
Yep, great stuff. So really what we've done is, I guess, the important thing is that wherever we do is not detrimental to the current status and biodiversity in the area, but is to look to how we can maybe set that on a path to let nature take over and let things evolve. So to date, it's just been about baseline gathering, getting to know the site really, really well. We've discovered a lot of stuff. We found out a lot of stuff. And I think it's about, like you said, just doing a little bit of due diligence and baseline stuff to see what we've got there. with some of the more higher level studies like the hydrology modeling. So for instance, where we're looking to maybe let the River Dee come back in to re-wet some of the areas on what was possibly was its natural sort of floodplain, was to make sure that these things work, and they're able to, you know, achieve what hopefully what we're looking to do. So it's been interesting, and as you know, it's still ongoing. It's evolving, and the beauty about this project, really, I guess, and the real beauty about it is that it is flexible. It's dynamic. It's a little bit fluid, and not boxed in by too many parameters at this stage. So that's, you know, been really refreshing.
So Hugh, just on the, so we commissioned CBEC to undertake this report, and it's quite an important one. So what we're looking at doing is to make 2 breaches, one in the upper bund. You might see that on the map on your screens to the right-hand side, and also one at the lower. And this will restore the flow. There'll be no negative effects elsewhere, because of course this is the part of the river that will come into the floodplain that we're restoring. What are the benefits of getting that flow back into the wetland?
I think the sort of key things that we've learned from it really is that, you know, the water wants to go that way, and it has gone that way in the past. So it's looking about, you know, enabling that to happen, and in many ways just standing back and watching that site evolve. You know, it wants to be wet. It wants to be just like the bit of wetland to the northeast of it. So really, it's all, I guess, what we're doing is minimalist stuff. Really, we're allowing that water to enter a point where it previously used to flow, and making sure that we accommodate certain things like public access, but really standing back, monitoring and enjoying it develop.
Because we'd hope to see obviously more wildfowl in this area, wouldn't we? And also in a sense of mammals as well. You know, we're looking at quite a rich habitat, I'd imagine, once it's a bit more dynamic and a bit more interesting, but wetter.
Yeah, for sure. I think you know, what wildfowl wise, I think, you know, we'll see it as being much more attractive to larger numbers of wildfowl, and that's an important thing in itself. And I know you've got a little bit later on about the history of the estate, which touches on its wildfowl sort of features. So yeah.
So what's really nice is, of course, nature provides us with an example of how things will be. So when we have a flood event like we had just last month, we get a little taste of what our bund intervention will create. So this is, Chris was up with his drone back in April, and we get to see that wetland in action. So our intervention will kind of stabilize a little bit more of this higher water level that you get very rarely on a much more regular basis. So we're hoping to have that. You almost get an archipelago of islands forming, as it would have been along the site, Threave Island being one of the remaining ones, which is really good. Great. Well, let's see where we're just going to put that break in the bund and get a close-up of the wetland in transition as it is. David, Chris, am I able to get a live feed? Great. So Chris, are you able to talk a little bit more about exactly what we're doing here and some of the process required to re-establish this wetland properly?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Sam. So we're looking at the River Dee here at the moment, and we're at a section of the River Dee. It's actually quite slow moving as it comes around this bend. We're actually stood on a section of embankment. So the intention is that we're going to breach around approximately 25 meters of the embankment here, which, when you consider the full length of the embankment, is about 450 meters. So it's not a huge section, and we arrived at that amount for kind of a process of looking at slightly longer lengths, slightly shorter lengths, until we got to one that we thought would give us the results that you talked about in the report there. So the embankment will be breached here. Then the intention is, what will happen then is that the River Dee will, at certain levels, will flow into the wetland area. some of the water will, the water will flow, obviously at certain levels, the water will then come through the embankment here. Some of the water will slowly make its way down through the wetland. Some of the water will be retained by the wetland, and the intention is that we'll have a scrape in there which will hold water for at least parts of the year. And obviously those sorts of things will be a massive benefit to biodiversity and to ecology. It'll also improve the natural flow of the wetland, so the water will flow from the top end slowly through until it reaches the bottom end of the wetland, where there will be a 10-metre breach to allow the water to slowly get back out into the River Dee. Currently, from the hydraulic modelling, we could see that under the current processes with the embankment, that wasn't happening, and there wasn't a natural flow through the woodland. It was actually backing up the bottom end and overtopping at the bottom end of the wetland instead of flowing through naturally as it should do.
Chris, you're breaking up a wee bit with the wind. I think we've got a good sense of what we're looking at. I think we can imagine where we're heading with that part of the project. Would you be okay to jump in the state vehicle and head over to the next station, please? And
yep, no problem.
A nice little segue for me to talk a little bit about some of the history of the National Trust for Scotland's relationship with Threave. Those of you who might know a little bit about the history of the site, the Gordon family of Threave had the estate since 1870. They built Threave House 1871, 1872. Many of you will have visited the garden. You'd have thought that perhaps the house was why, in 1948, Major Alan Gordon, the last of the Gordons, would have given the property to the National Trust for Scotland, but it wasn't. It was for the wetlands. It was to protect the habitat of the migrating geese in the winter, which is a key part of the project. That whole Kendee Basin is such an important site for our wintering geese population. And he was aware of that in 1948. He was aware of that for a long time. Like many of his generation, he'd fought in the First World War with distinction. When he got back to Scotland, he lived quite a quiet life, but he did continue to shoot. But as the years went on, his interests moved much more to conservation. In fact, when the property came to the National Trust for Scotland, and it was very interesting looking at some of our archive and letters, the discussions that were happening at the time with Major Alan Gordon and the National Trust for Scotland, he actually suggested blowing up Threave House. It was of so little heritage value in his mind, as long as we took care of the geese. And after 60 years of the property being in our active possession, 1960s when we took it completely in hand, he died in 1957, we are able to realize that original mission. We're able to start using the site in a way that you get to see much more of the wetland areas that Major Gordon was so keen on. If you visit today, your visit tends to be quite restricted. You don't tend to see very easily the wintering geese if you do come in winter. So hopefully this will start opening up the site in new ways, and with new footpaths, with new boardwalks, with kind of grouse butt viewing points, this entire landscape that we've been talking about will hopefully come together in a new way. And I hope that Major Alan Gordon will be proud of that. Now, of course, reconnecting to our heritage is a big part of the Galloway Glens Landscape Partnership Scheme, who are our key partners. McNab, this has often been said as a kind of flagship project for the scheme as a whole. Is that, how does that work in practice in your mind?
No, absolutely. Thanks so much, Sam. One way to lose an audience is to ask McNab to talk about the Galloway Glen scheme, but I will keep this very brief. Yeah, this absolutely, Threave Landscape Restoration Project is absolutely one of the highlights of the Galloway Glen scheme. And in a way, it embodies everything that we're trying to do. You'll see a graphic in front of you now, our summary of work to date and what we've achieved to date. It's all under this heading of connecting people to their heritage. And I think what's really exciting about the plans with the Threave Landscape Restoration Project is that this is connecting people to the heritage in every sense of the word. You've touched upon the cultural heritage and the history of the site, mankind on the site, and then also we're looking at the natural environment and bringing the natural heritage to life on the site. And we've got some really good, it's a really well-used site at the moment, some lovely paths and facilities at the moment. The idea that we could improve those paths and also improve the variety of what you're seeing from the paths, I think is probably what excites me most about this. So yeah, from the Galloway Glens point of view, we're around until 2023, and we're working hand in glove with Sam and his team to try and get the 100-year plan launched and a 100-year project underway. So
it kind of ties in very nicely the project that we were able to complete to link Castle Douglas to the nature reserve through to Bridge of Dee. Also things like the Go Wild scheme. It feels like this project's unlocked quite a few new partnerships.
Yeah, and locals to the site will know the popular route that runs Black Park Path that runs out to Threave Estate. We were able to resurface and improve that probably 18 months ago, and that was installed just before COVID hit, and it was a perfect piece of timing because that was really heavily used during that period of the pandemic. And I think we've really benefited from building the relationships really with National Trust to say, wow, that site is well used. It sort of fires us into this broader project. But yeah, it feels like a natural progression. And right here in the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire biosphere, and we're looking forward to COP26 at the end of this year. And you think there's so many connections here with allowing the natural processes to operate on the site is really the sort of ethos of the project. So yeah, absolutely ties in very well with what the Galloway Lens is looking to do.
Great, thanks, McNab. Let's see where our reporters are and if they've been able to get to the Knock Robin Hill, or if they've been stuck in our new wetland. Any questions, McNab, from the chat you want to pick up on? Just as
it's a great point, Sam. There's a couple of questions here. It's important to say this is the first event of probably going to be a few over coming months. So we're looking at another event on 1st of July, which is going to focus really in on local considerations. But there's a couple of broad questions that are being asked here. I think the question about what reassurance can we give regarding broader impact like Castle Douglas and Carling Walk Lane and things. And you mentioned that had been key to getting this project pulled together in the first place, was the absolute principle that we must not make it, we must only work in a positive direction on all these fronts, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a good point, McNab. Hugh, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the application that we're making, the processes with SEPA that kind of safeguard a lot of these activities that we're doing.
Yeah, so essentially, what we're looking at is going through a process which is the approved process. It's the right route through the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency. It's a recognised way of restoring landscapes and considering flood risks, etc. So we work closely with a design consultancy called CBEC, who are incredibly experienced in doing this stuff, and we've done due diligence. We've had to provide modeling on water levels at peak flows and 100 and 200 year flooding events. So we've done everything within the parameters that we need to do. That stuff has now been done. That's ecological considerations as well. That's protected species, the SPA, habitat protection. So that's all been undertaken as with part of the wider team, and that is now with SEPA for consideration and comment.
Yeah, and of course the important thing from the CBEC report, two important outcomes. One was that there was no risk to Castle Douglas. Obviously, we're opening up a downstream floodplain, so it's a minuscule percentile improvement because water will have somewhere else to go, being into our new wetland. And the other really important consideration was, of course, Threave Castle on the island. We didn't want to do anything which might jeopardize that. And again, minuscule, tiny improvement, but again, that force of water will be lessened by this wetland. The castle's incredibly strong. You've probably all seen images of it in flood, but it is good to know that what we're doing here adds benefits and is not a disadvantage. And that was great to have that confirmed in that report.
There's some really good questions coming in here, Sam, and I don't want to take your time, but if you've got time for one more.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Really good question about timescales. Now, this is a 100-year project, and I think the question's been asked here that will it take 100 years to yield benefits, or will we be measuring benefits over that? With the question about NEP, which is often thrown in with a discussion about NEP yielding benefits in a much shorter time. So, do you want to say something about timescales or how you see?
Yes, I mean the 100-year catchphrase obviously is a little bit of kind of marketing, and we can be honest about that, because what we're trying to demonstrate is that landscape changes take a long time. And if you think about a mature oak tree, and we're seeing the saplings coming up now, then that's the kind of scale that we're looking at. We're talking about our woodlands, and we're talking about getting to kind of peak carbon capture of different things. But the reality is that we're seeing the changes today already. I don't know if you follow the Galloway Glens Twitter, but there was a wonderful little video that was posted with David and Nick Chisholm, who's another project officer with the scheme and a kind of key partner for us, looking at an oak sapling that was just coming up on Knock-Robin Hill, where I'm hoping Chris and David will be broadcasting from in a couple of moments. But it's a really, it's absolutely, it's happened already. The bounce back is there. We're just needing to measure it, we need to study it, we need to understand, in fact, how it's working even quicker than we'd expected. The big change that we made 2 years ago, and I'm probably getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but was to stop slurry spreading and the intensivity of the cuts that were being taken. The land still will be managed, it will still be grazed, but that one changing the way slurry was being spread, has already this summer made a huge change. And you're seeing that already, I think, when you look on the images. I think if we go to Dave now and Chris, they're on the top of Knock-Robin Hill, and again, you're seeing straight away, if we can just bring that up, all these flowers, meadow flowers that we didn't see before. Now, Chris, are you all right to talk to us a little bit about what we're looking at here and what the interventions are for this part of the site, please? So Hugh, could I get you maybe to come in and talk to us a little bit about the Milburn and some of the plans for this? So as you're kind of getting a sense, it's like a big Petri dish, all these wee experiments happening at different parts of the site. Hugh, the Milburn.
Yeah, okay, so the Milburn, again, like you said, it's just another part of the project, but an important part, and an area which is possibly going to have some work done on it, a lot quicker than the rest of it. So essentially, the Milburn is a burn that's a reflection, but potentially of modern agriculture or evolving modern agriculture, where it's been straightened, deepened, some embankments made to channelize the water. So what we're looking at doing through using sort of leaky dams, wooden obstructions, is to try and get that burn to function a bit more like it would. So we're leaving some of the dead wood that would have traditionally been taken out of it in the burn. If stuff falls in, it stays in. And I guess really looking to restore some more natural sediment, the formation, and we are going to be looking at improvement to fisheries as well. So we've got some fishery studies, as you know, programmed for later this month. So yeah, it's exciting stuff, and hopefully, with what we've got planned, will, like you said, set it on the path to maybe doing a little bit more of its own thing.
So what will we see from a wildlife point of view in the Milburn that we're not seeing now in a couple of years' time?
I think it's fair to say that we'll hopefully see more vegetation, better community dynamics on the bank sides, allowing the water to do a little bit more what it wants to do, and create and erode the embankment a little bit more. We're going to be, as part as we're going to have cattle functioning as part of the wider management. And it's going to be interesting to see how they interact with what we've got planned, and allowing them to come back in some parts. So I guess it's simple stuff. It's small stuff, but it's going to have hopefully big biodiversity gains. Knock-Robin is traditionally known for as a refuge for feeding and roosting for grey lag geese and pink-feet geese primarily. Some large flocks of pink-feet visit the area, and one of the interesting things that we're looking at, with this area is maintaining that, not compromising that through our plans, but changing things slightly. And that it's going to be really interesting to see how these birds respond to this pasture where it's not going to be fertilized, it's not going to be slurried. There's going to be slight change in community dynamics in the sward. And coupled with the people that we're working with, very experienced goose researchers, we've got assurance that it's going to be an exciting change to watch. and hopefully it's going to be an area which is going to be more attractive for geese, really.
Great, thanks, Hugh. David, Chris, can I maybe ask you to again jump back into the estate vehicle? McNab, I think Chris needs to be made a he has made a co-host. That's great.
Yeah, I'm back on now, I think. If you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Yep,
yeah, we can. That's great. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind heading over to the next site, and we'll talk a little bit about grazing and the changes that we're looking at to grazing and with the belt of Galloways we've got on at the moment. In the meantime, I just wanted to touch on a couple of little things. From our point of view, as the organization's point of view, what's really good about these kind of projects, they're a bit like kind of honeypots. So you want to be able to maximize the potential and see how it links into the wider site. Now, if anyone knows, that's just where we were just now, by the way, that was not Robin Hill. So of course, we've got Kelton Mains, a wonderful listed farmhouse, mid-18th century construction that's been vacant since the last agricultural tenant left us about 10 years ago. So that's how long this project's been in development. It's about a decade of kind of what do we do with this site? And in more recent years, thanks to the partnership with the Galloway Glens and with others, our thinking's really crystallized. And it's about also looking at heritage holistically too, not just having a silo of natural heritage or built heritage. We want to bring those things together. And if this is the type of site that we're expecting it to be, where people will want to visit, they'll want to learn, it's a real opportunity for us to see how Kelton Mains as farmhouse could be saved from vacancy and how we might be able to develop this wonderful property alongside the wider new attraction, I suppose, from a tourist point of view, that will be Threave Landscape Restoration Project. And of course, we're already looking at how that might work from a kind of conceptual point of view. So if things work out and this project is a success, it could well down the line bring in new investment and new jobs for creating the type of visitor infrastructure that you'd expect from a National Trust for Scotland site. So fingers crossed, it helps unlock future developments, a kind of value chain from the heritage point of view. Now, of course, thinking to the heritage of the site, we have to mention the Galloway Levellers. I think many people will know the Galloway Levellers. People much more expert than I am. I remember the late great Alistair Livingston was a wonderful expert on the Galloway Levellers as well. The tradition, as it is for those who don't know, was about 1724. There was an agricultural revolt. People, for lots of different reasons, from the enclosures to the increase of rents to economic, social, religious issues, finally had enough. And at the Kelton Hill Fair over at Roanhouse, they formed mobs, formed gangs led by captains, and started to disrupt the activities of those they blamed for all their ills, which was, of course, the lairds, the landed gentry, who were making all these changes to the landscape. And the focus, of course, was on this big agriculture that was forming at the time against the black cattle. And they maimed cattle, but also, most famously, they would get together in groups and they would heave and push over the dikes. That was the critical infrastructure for the early 18th century cattle economy of southwest Scotland. So they knew what they were doing by disrupting this, to get revenge on the landlords for increasing the rents and the evictions that were happening. So it's quite a poetic but important tradition that we have on site. This idea that the leveling of boundaries is a symbol of social change, of protest, and of striving for a better future. So on that note, I'm hoping that we might be able to have a wee look at an area where we're starting to do this in a new way, not the Galloway Levellers, but the Threave Levellers. Take some questions if you like.
Would I be able to hit you with a question, Sam?
Go ahead.
I mean, I know we're looking at the broader picture here today, and there will be more detailed meetings afterwards, but this question comes up about public use of the site. And I don't know whether you want to say something, just a very broad comment about how you see public use. And we're talking about bringing cattle onto the site and things and sort of...
I mean, it is still farmed land, and it's important that everyone follows the Scottish Countryside Access Code and is aware of the owner's responsibility to manage their dogs, manage their children, manage themselves responsibly around livestock. It's incredibly important. I think there's new legislation through the Scottish Parliament to protect that. So it's important that we have that element respected. This is our right to roam is a real privilege, but it comes with responsibilities, and we have to be very mindful of spaces that we're in. We want people to be free, but also safe, and to respect the activities that are happening there. Importantly, from our side, we are working with excellent graziers who will be bringing cattle to the site, which have the right demeanour for a very busy site. We get 30,000 visitors as it is. We'd hope that would increase in due course, but it is important we have that consideration. Also, we know that the paths are kind of loved and are a really important part of the community, which is why we've committed to preserving all the core paths and increasing the path network with new infrastructure as well. So these boardwalks we've been talking about that get you over the wetlands, they're going to be quite stunning, and I think they're going to be a real asset to the community, and again a draw for people to come to the area to go on these boardwalks, explore these wetlands, these new woodlands. And in amongst these wetlands and woodlands, we're putting in grouse butts, not for shooting in this case, but to hide us from the migratory geese, or to be a way to kind of shelter from the elements. Likewise, we're constructing some sheepfolds that will give a kind of interpretation at different areas as well. So it's going to feel a lot more visitor friendly. There's going to be a lot more access to more parts of the site, and hopefully the new footpath network should really be a big advantage for us. And anything to add on to that, McNab, that I might have missed, or any particular points?
No, I think that was good. I think I just saw Dave Thompson's screen flicker. He may be ready for
good. Dave, we were just talking about the Galloway levelers, and I was wondering if you could pick up on the modern version of the Threave levelers.
Chris is going to talk on my behalf. It's so windy.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Chris.
Hello. Yeah, so we've moved over to the west of the site now, and I know that Dave and the NTS volunteers have already really started with the levelers project, and he informs me that they've removed over 1,800 meters of fencing already on the site. I think in total across the site there's about 8,000 meters of fencing, so there's a lot of fencing around Kelton Mains. I mean, what David is showing you at the moment is a section that has now had the fencing removed. This is a section where Dave and the volunteers have been out and removed fencing already. As I said, it's over 1,800 meters of fencing now. So gradually the landscape is reopening, and obviously part of the Threave landscape restoration project is to have an open landscape with better connectivity for wildlife around the site. But also an important element of that is that grazing, as you've already mentioned, will still be undertaken. And I think there are some belted Galloways already on the site, possibly just in the next field. I think David's going to try and find them now. But so the reason why they're here is that in a natural landscape, herbivores will move around freely, as well as grazing, around the area, providing fertility, opening up the ground for seedlings, basically creating an open landscape. In the past, we would have had other animals doing that. We wouldn't have been cows or belted Galloways. It would have been things like the auroch. But in conservation, in this day and age, in conservation, we generally use cattle like as native a breed as possible. And one of the things that we're going to be trying to use here is the no fence technology. And that will help us to understand grazing pressures and different parts of the site. We'll be able to control where cattle can access, where they can't access, and we can move them around the site without the use of fences. I'm not sure, did you talk about the no fence technology at all?
I've not, Chris, so you're welcome to tell us a little bit more about that technology.
Okay, no problem. So the no fence technology works through cow collars on the cows and through an app. And through the app, you can design pastures and you can design exclusion zones, so you can control exactly where the cattle can be, but without the need for fencing. And the way the collars work is they interact with the no fence technology in that they give sound warnings to the cattle as they come close to a boundary, and they get a number of warnings until they get to the boundary, in which once they do get to the boundary, there's a slight electronic pulse, which is no different to an electric fence. And so it removes the need for electric fencing and other fencing around the site. And like I say, it allows cattle to there they are, there's the belted Galloways there. So they will be roaming freely around the site at some point in the near future, hopefully.
And that's really good because that allows us to graze different areas, as you said, at different times, in particular to react to the wetland, to react to also hopefully being able to graze amongst the trees when that becomes a possibility as well. So a much more holistic view of grazing, which I think is really important for the quality of the land, but also I imagine from a welfare point of view as well. On that, I think, Hugh, we could talk a little bit about holistic grazing and soil, and that's a big kind of key measurement. Dave and Chris, can I send you down to the last site, please, to have a wee look at the woodland aspect of the project? That would be great, thank you. So Hugh, we've spoken a lot about the chemical changes that we're looking at for the site, and it's been a big part of the research that we've done, that baseline survey. Could you tell us a little bit more about why that's important, and what's the situation and how's it going to change, please?
So yeah, Chris summed up quite a lot of good stuff there, but looking at soils and grazing and using the herbivores that we've got, the belted Galloways, to help us function in this landscape. So I guess the Kelton Mains has got a lot of grass, and under that grass is soil, and that's there's a very pertinent subject area at the moment, is looking at soils and carbon sequestration and restoring landscape and restorative ag. So I guess what we've done really as a team, we've talked about it, and we're doing the fundamental baseline surveying now. We're looking at how can we model that change? How do we know that we're going to make the land better, perhaps, or improve biodiversity, community dynamics, water cycle, the mineral cycle? So we've taken the holistic approach to land management and set in place ecological monitoring. So we're not just whilst this is flexible to change our approach to things as we go, we are underpinning it with monitoring of what we're doing. So between every so 1 to 10 years, year one is soil analysis, carbon analysis, organic matter analysis, biodiversity, community dynamic analysis within set transects, which are repeated every year on those transects to look at that. And every 5 years, we will then redo a carbon and organic matter assessment. And all this stuff will help inform us as to what's going on in the landscape. It will also inform us and help us with the grazing regime management, how those herbivores are going to help us in that landscape and function in the ecosystem. So it's a lot of exciting stuff. There's a lot of discovery stuff going on. So yeah, really, it's we as you said, we just starting. So we just keep monitoring it and tweaking things and going back through our context and our feedback loops to make sure that we're consistent in what we're doing. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch.
So in terms of again, what it's going to look like, I mean, our visitors going around a year or two ago would have seen very typical, very green grassland. Already it seems to be changing. Can you kind of paint us a little picture of what you'd expect to see in a year or two's time, and how the soils influence that?
Yeah, I think it's still going to be green, that's for sure. It's going to be a green landscape, but I think hopefully what you're going to see is a little bit less of the more conventional sort of grazing and we're not going to be applying fertilizers, we're not going to be applying slurry to the land, we are not going to be looking at cultivating or turning over soil. So there's going to be some subtle tweaks and changes in how the land's managed. But effectively, we're keeping it simple. The cattle are going to do the work, and as Chris said, it just so happens in this case that we've got native bred belted Galloways doing the job, and they're mimicking nature really, essentially. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think potentially the thing that stands out in mind is that you're probably going to see greater community dynamics on the sward. That is something which is using these principles that we're doing. It's starting to get proven world over now that you can build back better soil, you can improve community dynamics. You're going to get potentially wildflowers, forbs, herbs coming through, slightly longer sward heights on the grasses, subtle changes like curlew maybe coming back into the landscape to nest. Maybe the skylark numbers are going to start popping up, and we're going to be monitoring that as you know over time.
No, it's great. It's kind of like a very positive domino effect, isn't it? We get one thing right, and we're just keeping an eye on how that supports everything else. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Hugh. I wonder if we've got Chris and David on site talk a little bit about the woodland restoration element as well, and the creation of kind of 20-25 kind of hectare woodland. So we're looking at the kind of area that we will hopefully in due course see all as native woodland. Chris, you want to talk a little bit about what we're kind of likely to kind of see, how it works in practice? We might want to touch on some of the threats, obviously, to this type of woodland creation.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, we're over in the east of the site. I think I said west earlier just to confuse things. We're actually in the east of the site. And this area is where we're going to have a lot of, woodland planting taking place in the two fields that you can see that David's filming at the moment. And most of the woodland planting really is restricted to the east of the site, and that's to improve connectivity with existing woodland areas, with areas of hedgerows as well that come away from the woodlands, and to maintain a kind of woodland and wetland differentiation between the Threave Landscape Restoration Project as well. So, as we mentioned earlier about the grazing, so woodland regeneration is going to be encouraged alongside the grazing, and through this area here to be planted, we are going to maintain the connectivity as well. So there will be grassy paths as well coming through the woodland area and connecting up with the rest of the Threave landscape area as well. And the work here has kind of already started as well. So in the woodland, just I don't know if you can just see it in the distance there were significant numbers of non-native conifers within that woodland, and work has already finished really to remove those as part of the regeneration project as well.
This is going to be one of the most kind of intensively managed to a certain extent, because even though we're talking about, we removed the non-native, we're looking at some planting, looking at some regen. There's also going to need to be consideration of deer management, and we're going to have to look at a different type of approach to deer management and see which ways work best. Is it the tube versus the cull versus maybe more holistic ways out there in using some trefoil to start creating kind of palisades, or letting areas kind of go a little bit more scrubby and wilder to try and get a really interesting mix. But this woodland, when you're going back to that 100-year project, I think this woodland is one of the things that will need a good few decades before we get that impact. So we're connecting those islands of ancient woodland that we've currently got. And Threave is lucky to have a lot of the raw materials on side. We just need to bring them together. David's pointing at, I think, at that woodland. I'm just looking at time. Chris, Hugh, is there anything you'd like to add in on the woodland before we kind of move to a conclusion?
The only thing I would say, Sam, is that it's happening. Succession is happening as we see it, just with a short break in grazing impact and mowing regime. Trees are wanting to come back. They're showing us where they want them to come back. So that's really encouraging, and it's really great to see that subtle change already. Really, so it's great.
Great, thank you. Just to kind of give a kind of slightly bigger picture kind of context to what we're up to at Threave from the National Trust for Scotland point of view, I'd like to introduce Stuart Brooks, who is Head of Conservation and Policy for the National Trust for Scotland. Stuart, are you still on the line?
Thanks, Sam. Yes, I'm still here. Hi, everybody. Nice to know that you're there, even though I can't see you. And I had the privilege of a site visit, actually, a rare site visit in these days at the beginning of the week. And it was just one of the most amazing kind of places and days that I've had for a long time. Fortunate with the weather, other than today. But brilliant. And actually, this whole kind of event, I think, just kind of illustrates to me the kind of level of innovation and forward thinking that Sam and the team have undertaken here. And I think you're absolutely right to kind of set this within a kind of 100-year context. Somebody made the point in the chat that you know, we should be seeing biodiversity benefits almost immediately, and we are. I thought that there was a big finger there pointing to an oak seedling, and I understood, you know, that these are now kind of populating, you know, much of the site, and it's amazing to see. So brilliant illustration, I think, and also great to see the kind of innovation actually in this presentation and the commitment to kind of learning and sharing of the information, which I know is such a really kind of big part of this program. So just a tiny bit of context, and to some extent, I would say the Trust is catching up with you, Sam, in terms of aligning its strategy to what is now this vision at Dalton Mains. So like a lot of organisations, like a lot of charities, Trust has been through quite a tough time of late, but we've come through it out the other side. But we did decide that we would bring forward our strategy review by a year, and I've started that process, and we did that with a bit of a consultation with our members, and some really strong messages coming through, which we're looking to kind of progress and then kind of see implemented through projects such as this, but across the whole Trust. So we definitely want to have kind of more nature-focused projects. The Trust is a big landowner. It's got some amazing nature sites. We do some brilliant work. We possibly just don't make enough of it. So shining a stronger spotlight on nature in the work that the Trust does will be a big part of our new strategy going forward. Likewise, a much kind of more concerted effort and contribution towards some of the big societal challenges like reversing the loss of biodiversity, and we've heard a fair bit about that just now and how that might be done here, but also climate change. And clearly it's one of the kind of biggest issues and the biggest challenges that we're all facing. And in particular, actually, how agriculture might evolve to make more of a positive contribution in that light. And I think it's brilliant that the program here, the project here, is looking to kind of integrate agricultural production in what is otherwise kind of framed as a kind of biodiversity and climate and landscape project. And again, I think that's absolutely right. And I'm not thinking that we're, you know, proposing to kind of have all the answers here, and this could be a solution for everybody. But we'll definitely kind of invest significant time and energy in kind of learning the lesson here, and then sharing and communicating that. You know, Scotland's got some big challenges to address as we come out of the EU, what our agricultural policy is going to be going forward. But you know, food security and employment in the rural sector, these are really important things, and I think, you know, our project here can make a contribution to that. So I'm kind of really excited, really inspired, I think, for what this program can do, both for the site, for the region, but also for the Trust. So it's a kind of byproduct, really, and it's not kind of part of the program's objectives, but I think this is actually going to kind of help to bring the whole Trust up just through, I think, its inspiration and the learning that we'll share internally, as well as we're doing now externally. So great stuff, and fabulous to have all of these people kind of engaged and asking such great questions.
Great, thank you very much, Stuart, for those words and that kind of bit of context from the trust and the wider picture. And thank you to everyone for attending. It's been really good to just share, as Stuart was saying, where we are at this time. And I think there's been quite a few questions that have been put in. McNab, we're talking about having a frequently asked questions kind of document to go out. We won't be able to get back to everyone just now, but I'll kind of hand over to you, McNab, to kind of sum up just on the logistics side. And again, thank you to everyone for coming.
Brilliant, and absolute kudos, Sam. Thanks so much for guiding us through that. And I think sometimes you take a risk with technology, and it paid off. I think it really gave an insight from the site itself. So thanks so much to everyone involved. We've got loads of great questions here. Obviously, we can't go into them now. I think what's great is we can save the questions and we can come back to people with the answers for it. But if this has whetted your appetite for more detail about the Threave Landscape Restoration Project, I should do a pointer for an event on the evening of the 1st of July. That's the next. It's going to be a bit more sort of local, focusing on local issues. Some of the questions that have come up here. But I think the key thing is what's been talked about here. This is a 100-year project, building the profile of the Threave estate as this really exciting site. And so, yeah, thanks so much to everyone that's come along. Do feel free, if you've got any questions, please come either to Galloway Glens or directly to NTS. We're working very, very closely. And yeah, but back to you, Sam. That's everything from my point of view.
Well, thanks to everyone again, and hopefully see you on site visiting the Threave Landscape Restoration Project when the weather improves.